The alien palace stood tall under the twin moons shining with silver light. From far away, it looked like a place of power and glory, filled with wealth and pride. But behind the golden walls, a story of sadness lived quietly. At the center of this story was the alien queen herself. Everyone saw her as a strong ruler, a woman of beauty and authority, the voice of law, the symbol of tradition. Yet inside, her heart was heavy with a pain that she carried alone. The queen walked slowly through the long corridors of her palace. Servants bowed when she passed. Soldiers stood straight, and nobles lowered their eyes in respect. To them she was perfect, untouchable, a figure larger than life. But when she was alone in her chambers, her shoulders bent under a weight no crown could hide. She wanted one thing in her life that her throne, her armies, her jewels could never give her. She wanted a child. For many years she had tried. Her husband, the king, was old, much older than her. Their marriage was never built on love, only on duty and politics. The king saw her as nothing more than a tool to keep his bloodline alive. He gave her orders, but never kindness. He shared his throne, but never his heart. And when no child came, he blamed her. The court whispered behind her back. The elders spoke softly in their councils, saying, "What good is a queen who cannot give an heir?" The people prayed for a new generation, but their queen remained without children. Every word was like a dagger to her soul. Every look reminded her of her failure. She smiled in public, but at night she cried alone. Her private chamber was a cold place. The walls were covered in symbols of her people's history, tales of mothers who gave birth to kings and queens, legends of families who carried on the royal bloodline. The queen would stand before those carvings and feel the crushing truth. She was the first to break the chain. She often whispered to herself, "What is a queen who cannot give her people a future?" Her husband did not help. The king's face was lined with age, his eyes sharp with judgment. "It is your duty," he told her one night, his voice cold as stone. "If you cannot give this kingdom a son or daughter, then you are nothing more than decoration on my throne." He turned his back to her, leaving her in silence. She stared at his figure and felt a mixture of anger and despair. He had never loved her. He only needed her womb. Still, she kept her pain hidden. To the outside world, she showed strength. She held councils, signed decrees, led ceremonies. Her people bowed to her, never knowing that the strongest woman in the empire cried into her pillow every night. She would press her hands against her stomach, begging the stars, "Why not me? Why am I cursed?" Her loneliness grew darker with each passing season. Festivals came and went, and she watched other mothers with their children. She envied the way small hands clung to robes, the way innocent eyes looked up with love. She imagined how it would feel to hear someone call her mother. That dream was a flame inside her, small but burning. Yet it seemed the universe had turned against her. One evening, as the palace grew quiet, the queen sat by her window. Snow fell outside, covering the alien gardens with white silence. She touched the glass and whispered, "Even the stars look down at me with pity." Her eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall where anyone could see. Only the darkness knew her sorrow. Still, somewhere inside her, a spark of rebellion lived. She was not just a queen, not just a woman trapped in duty. She was more than a womb for an old man's bloodline. She was a soul who longed for meaning, a heart that longed for love. In those quiet hours when she looked into the endless sky, she made herself a promise. "If I cannot find hope here," she whispered into the night, "then I will find it elsewhere. I will search even beyond these walls. I will not let this pain be my end." The queen's secret pain was heavy, but it also carried the seed of change. She did not know it yet, but her path was about to cross with someone who would shatter her sorrow, someone who would give her the chance to rewrite her fate. And far away, beyond the stars, the sound of a human's footsteps was already moving toward her destiny. The days inside the palace grew colder, not because of the season, but because of the silence between the queen and her husband. Every council meeting ended with criticism. Every private conversation ended with blame. The queen carried herself with grace before the eyes of her people, but inside her heart cracked like glass. The king's health was failing. His back was bent, his voice often weak, but his pride was stronger than ever. He ruled with an iron hand and sharp words, and when he looked at his wife, his eyes carried no warmth. One evening, during a gathering of the royal court, he stood tall enough to make his voice echo through the hall. "My people," he declared, "our queen has failed her duty. The throne remains without an heir. Without children, our bloodline weakens. Without children, our kingdom's future is uncertain. The queen stood beside him, her crown heavy on her head. Her face showed calm, but her heart burned with humiliation. Nobles exchanged whispers. Elders nodded grimly. She could feel the sting of their judgment without a single word spoken to her. When the ceremony ended, she walked behind her husband in silence. Inside his private chamber, she finally spoke. "You shamed me in front of the entire court." The king turned slowly, his old face hard and unkind. "I only spoke the truth. They must know who is to blame." "It is not me. It is you." Her voice trembled. "You have never loved me. All you see is failure. Love?" The king almost laughed, but his laughter was bitter. "Love does not keep empires alive. Children do. If you cannot provide them, then you are nothing but an empty shell wearing a crown." His words cut deeper than any blade. For the first time, the queen did not lower her head. She stared at him, her eyes filled with pain, but also with defiance. "Perhaps you are the empty one," she whispered. "A man too old to give life, too proud to see the truth." The king's hand shook in anger. He raised it as if to strike her, but then stopped, his strength failing him. He turned away, muttering, "Leave me. I cannot look at you." The queen left the chamber with tears burning in her eyes. She walked quickly, her steps echoing through the long corridor until she reached her own room. There she fell to her knees. She pressed her palms to the cold floor and whispered, "I cannot endure this any longer." That night she could not sleep. She looked out of her window at the distant stars, and her heart spoke words her lips did not dare to say. Maybe my destiny is not here. Maybe I was never meant to find life beside him. The next morning the pressure grew heavier. The council of elders gathered in the palace hall, their robes sweeping across the marble floor. One of them, an ancient alien with pale eyes, stepped forward. His voice was calm but cruel. "Your Majesty," he said, "the kingdom suffers." Whispers spread among the people. They fear for the bloodline. Some even say you have been cursed. "We cannot allow this shadow to fall upon our empire. If you cannot give us a future, then perhaps the throne must pass to another branch of the family." The queen's chest tightened. She felt the weight of every word. Still, she stood tall, her voice strong though her hands trembled behind her robe. "I have given everything to this kingdom. Do not speak to me of curses. I am not cursed. I'm alive, stronger than any of you." The elders bowed, but their eyes told another story. They no longer believed in her. That evening, as the palace fell into silence, the queen made her decision. She could no longer live in chains made of duty and shame. She gathered a few precious things: a cloak of dark fabric, a small knife for protection, and a single jewel from her crown, enough to trade for survival beyond the palace. She looked once more at the grand halls of her home and whispered, "This is not where my story ends." As she stepped into the shadows, a figure moved nearby. One of the palace soldiers, a young warrior with sharp eyes, had seen her slipping away. He followed her silently, suspicion rising. The queen did not notice him as she walked toward the hidden gate. Her cloak fluttered behind her like wings of rebellion. The soldier frowned. Why would a queen sneak out in the middle of the night? Was this treason, betrayal? He placed his hand on his communicator, but then stopped. Something in the queen's steps, something in the sadness of her posture made him hesitate. He let her pass, whispering to himself, "May the stars guide you, Majesty, wherever you are going." The queen left the palace that night, her heart filled with both fear and hope. Fear of the unknown, hope for a chance to feel alive again. She did not know where her path would lead. She only knew she could not stay. And beyond the dark horizon, fate was preparing a meeting, one that would change not only her life, but the destiny of two worlds. The queen's journey began with silence. She left her palace under the cold stars, her dark cloak wrapped tightly around her. For the first time in years, no servants followed, no guards watched, and no crown weighed heavy on her head. She was free, yet this freedom felt both strange and frightening. Every step away from the palace was a step into the unknown. She traveled for many days, moving from one empty plain to another. Her planet was vast, but she avoided the cities where her name and face were known. At night, she slept beneath the silver moons, staring at the endless stars that reminded her of all the worlds beyond her own. She wondered if somewhere in those distant lights there was a place where she could belong. One evening, as the twin suns dipped low, she found herself near the borderlands. The air smelled of dust and metal. Broken machines lay scattered across the rocky ground. old ships that had fallen long ago, the remains of wars and failed travelers. She pulled her cloak tighter as the wind howled. Then she heard something unusual, a sound, a steady rhythmic noise that did not belong to the desert. It was not the call of animals or the shifting of stones. It was heavier, more human. Footsteps. The queen froze. Her heart raced. She thought it might be a soldier from her palace sent to follow her. She crouched behind a piece of broken metal and listened. The steps grew louder. Then from the shadows of the wreckage a figure appeared. It was not one of her people. The stranger walked with an uneven gait, his body slightly bent as if carrying pain. His clothes were torn, covered in dust. His skin was darker than hers, his hair short and unkempt. In one hand he held a strange tool that looked like both a weapon and a device. His face was tired, his lips cracked, but his eyes burned with determination. He was human. The queen had seen humans before, but only from a distance, traders, explorers, diplomats who visited her world under strict rules. This one was different. He looked alone, fragile yet strangely unbroken. She stayed hidden, but the man stumbled, clutching his side. Blood stained his shirt. He leaned against the broken hull of an old ship, his breathing shallow. The queen's instincts stirred. Despite years of coldness from her husband, her heart still carried compassion. She could not watch him suffer. She stepped forward. Her cloak rustled in the wind. The human lifted his head, his eyes widening as he saw her. For a moment, both stared at each other, unsure of what would come next. Who are you?" the man asked, his voice weak but alert. The queen did not reveal her true identity. "Just a traveler," she said softly. The man studied her face. Even beneath the cloak, her regal posture and graceful movements betrayed who she truly was. But he did not recognize her. To him, she was only a stranger in the wasteland. "You should leave," he coughed. "This place is not safe." The queen ignored his warning. She knelt beside him, her eyes scanning his injury. A sharp piece of metal had cut his side deeply. His survival depended on treatment, yet he seemed to have no supplies. She tore a strip from her cloak and pressed it against his wound. He hissed in pain but did not push her away. "Why help me?" he asked through clenched teeth. "Because I can," she answered simply. The man gave a weak smile. "Strange. Most who pass by do not stop, especially not for someone like me." The queen tilted her head. "And what are you?" He let out a tired laugh. "Just a human. Stranded, broken ship, no crew, no hope." His words slowed as exhaustion pressed against him. "But I'm not ready to give up. Not yet." Her chest tightened at his words. She saw in him something she had not seen in her own people for a long time, a refusal to surrender, even when everything seemed lost. That night, she built a small fire near the wreckage. She shared the little food she had while the man told fragments of his story. He was an explorer from a distant colony, searching for trade routes, but his ship had crashed in the borderlands. His crew had died, leaving him the only survivor. For weeks he had fought to live, fixing machines, hunting scraps, waiting for a rescue that never came. The queen listened silently. She felt something strange stir inside her. This man, though weak and wounded, carried strength of spirit greater than her husband ever had. He had no throne, no crown, yet he refused to break. When the firelight flickered across his face, she caught herself staring at him longer than she meant to. He noticed but said nothing. Instead he asked, "And you? Who are you, really? You don't walk like a wanderer. You walk like someone born to be obeyed." The queen's lips curved in a faint smile. "Perhaps I was," she whispered, "but that life is gone now." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "Then maybe. This wasteland has given me more than I thought. Someone to talk to. Someone who understands what it means to be lost." The queen looked at him as he drifted toward sleep. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. For years she had been surrounded by people, yet completely alone. Now, beside a wounded stranger, she felt less lonely than she had ever felt in her palace. She pulled her cloak tighter and stared into the flames. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one truth echoed in her mind. This human was not just a chance meeting. He was a turning point, and deep inside she sensed the stars themselves had brought her to him. The fire burned low in the night, sending sparks into the dark sky. The queen sat close to the human, listening to his uneven breathing. His wound was still fresh, but the cloth she tied had slowed the bleeding, In the silence, she heard the distant cries of desert beasts, but somehow near this broken ship and stranger, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her palace. Morning came with a pale sun. The human stirred, opening his tired eyes. He looked at her, confused at first, then surprised that she was still there. "You stayed," he whispered. The queen nodded. "You needed help." A weak smile touched his lips. "Most would have left me for dead." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment she saw honesty. Not the sharp, judging stares of the council, not the cold disappointment of her husband, but something simple. Gratitude. She did not know why, but it made her chest feel lighter. As the days passed, the queen and the human began to share more. He taught her how to start a fire with scraps from his wrecked ship. He showed her how to filter water from the desert stones. In return, she helped him clean his wound and gathered food from the land she once only ruled from a distance. Each evening, they sat by the fire and spoke. The queen listened as he told stories of his home, a place far away with green forests and wide oceans. His eyes shone as he described simple things: the sound of rain on a roof, the laughter of children playing in open fields, the warmth of a family gathered around a table. The queen closed her eyes, imagining it. She had never known such a life. To her, home was golden walls and silent halls. Her husband never shared laughter, never spoke of love, only of duty. Hearing the human's words, she realized there was a different kind of strength in him, not power over others, but care for them. One night, as the fire cracked, she finally spoke of her own pain. Her voice was low, almost breaking. "I was a queen. I had everything, palace, armies, jewels, but none of it mattered. My people judged me because I could not give them a child. My husband shamed me before the court. To them I was nothing without an heir." The human listened quietly. When she finished, he leaned closer, his eyes steady. "Then they are blind. A person is not measured by what others demand, but by the strength of their heart. And yours is stronger than most I've ever seen." The queen felt her throat tighten. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than her crown. For the first time in years, she felt human, but their fragile peace did not last long. One evening, while the queen was gathering herbs near the wreckage, she sensed movement. A shadow flickered among the rocks. Her body stiffened. She was not alone. Slowly, she returned to the fire where the human sat, unaware of the danger. "Stay alert," she whispered to him. Before he could ask why, a sharp whistle cut through the air. From the darkness, an alien scout stepped forward, weapon in hand. His armor bore the crest of the palace. He had been tracking her. The human stood, his body tense despite his injury. The queen's eyes widened. If the scout reported back, the king and the council would know she had abandoned the palace. Worse, they would know she was with a human. "Your Majesty," the scout sneered, bowing mockingly. The court wondered where their queen had gone. "Now I see. Running away with a fragile off-worlder? What will they say when I bring them this news?" The queen's blood turned cold. The human moved slightly in front of her, his hand gripping a broken piece of metal like a weapon. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. The scout laughed. You can barely stand. A weak creature like you thinks he can protect her?" But the queen stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Enough," she said, her voice strong and commanding. "If you wish to take me back, you'll have to face me first." The scout hesitated. He had expected a broken woman, not a defiant one. His weapon lowered slightly, but his smirk remained. "Very well. But you cannot hide forever. The palace will know. And when they do, they will decide if a queen who chooses a human is fit to rule." With those words, he vanished into the night, leaving only silence and the sound of the fire. The queen's heart pounded. She sat down heavily, her hands trembling. The human placed a hand on her shoulder. "He won't be the last, will he?" She shook her head. "No, they will come again. And when they do, they will see me as a traitor." He looked at her seriously. "Then you must decide. Do you go back to a life that crushed you? Or do you keep walking forward no matter the cost?" She stared at him, and in his eyes she saw the truth. He was weak in body, but strong in spirit, stronger than anyone she had ever known. And in that moment, trust began to grow between them, not just born of need, but of choice. She whispered almost to herself, "Maybe I have already decided." The fire had almost died when the queen finally spoke again. Her voice was low, heavy with the weight of the scout's threat. "They will not stop," she said. "The king, the council, the elders, they will not forgive me for leaving. And now with you by my side, they will call it betrayal." The human looked at her, his face pale in the dim light. "Then what will you do?" For a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes wandered to the stars above, endless and unbroken. She thought of her palace halls filled with cold whispers and sharp eyes. She thought of her husband who had never once seen her as more than a tool. And then she thought of this man, broken yet unyielding, who had stood in front of her when danger came. Her heart whispered an answer long before her lips did. She could never go back. The next morning, they moved together across the desert. The human limped but refused to stop. The queen stayed close, offering her arm when he faltered. She had never walked beside anyone as an equal before. Always, others had walked behind her or bowed in front of her. But with him it felt different, like two travelers carrying the same burden. At midday they reached a canyon where jagged rocks carved deep shadows. The queen stopped suddenly. Her senses sharpened. Something was wrong. From the cliffs above, armored figures stepped into view, 3 palace scouts, each holding weapons that gleamed in the sun. "There she is," one of them said. "The runaway queen!" The human's jaw tightened. He pulled her behind a boulder for cover, even though his own body trembled with weakness. "Stay low," he whispered. The queen's chest burned with anger. She was tired of hiding. She was tired of running from her own people. She stood tall, her cloak whipping in the wind. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice echoing across the canyon. "You will not decide my fate. I am still your queen." The scouts hesitated, surprised at her defiance. One of them sneered. "You shame the throne with your weakness. You choose a human over your people? If you return now, perhaps the council will show mercy. But if you resist, you will be remembered as nothing more than a traitor." The queen's eyes blazed. She felt the human's hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. He leaned close and whispered, "This is your choice. Not theirs. Not even mine, yours." Her heart pounded. For years she had lived under orders, rules, and expectations. Every decision had been made for her. Whom to marry, how to rule, how to serve her people. But now for the first time she was free to choose, and she chose. She stepped forward, her voice clear and unshaken. "I choose my own path. I choose life beyond your chains, and I will not abandon the one who gave me the courage to stand here." The scouts raised their weapons, but before they could strike, the human moved. Despite his wound, despite his weakness, he picked up a broken piece of metal from the ground and faced them. "You'll have to go through me first," he growled. The queen's breath caught. He was only human, fragile compared to the armored warriors, yet his spirit was unbreakable. That courage ignited something within her. With a cry, she snatched the knife hidden in her cloak and stood beside him. Together they fought. The battle was fierce. The human blocked a strike, his arms shaking from the force. The queen slashed at another scout, her movements sharp and desperate. Dust swirled around them, the clash of metal echoing through the canyon. At last the scouts pulled back, bloodied and beaten. One glared at her with hatred. "This is not the end, Majesty. You cannot run forever." Then they vanished into the shadows, retreating to deliver their news. Silence returned. The queen stood panting, her hands trembling, her heart racing. She turned to the human, who leaned against the rocks, breathing hard. His wound had reopened, blood staining his shirt. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, pressing her hands against the injury. "Why did you do that?" she whispered fiercely. He smiled faintly. "Because you're worth it. Because no one deserves to fight alone." Her eyes stung with tears. No one had ever said such words to her. Not her husband, not her court, not her people. She had been a symbol, a ruler, a duty, but never simply a woman worth standing beside. At that moment, her choice was sealed. She would never go back to the palace. She would never kneel to those who only saw her as a vessel. She would walk forward even if the entire empire called her traitor. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "Then from this day I will not let you fight alone either." The human closed his eyes, his lips curving into the faintest smile. And so, in the heart of the canyon, under the silent stars, the queen made her choice, not just for herself, not just against her kingdom, but for a bond that had only just begun. What she did not know was that this bond would grow into something greater than either of them could imagine, something powerful enough to shake 2 worlds. The desert winds had carried away the dust of battle, but the queen knew the peace would not last. The scouts had escaped. They would return to the palace with their news. The queen had abandoned her husband, and worse, she had chosen a human. For days, she and the man traveled together, moving through canyons and empty valleys. His wound healed slowly, but his spirit never broke. At night, when the stars stretched endlessly above, they spoke of what awaited them. "They will hunt us," the human said one evening, as they sat near a small fire. The queen's eyes glowed in the firelight. "Then let them hunt. I am done hiding. If they want answers, I will give them myself." Her voice carried a strength even she had not felt before. For so long she had lived under chains made of tradition, but now she was ready to face the empire, not as a prisoner of duty, but as a woman who had made her own choice. The day came sooner than expected. At dawn, they were surrounded. Dozens of palace guards appeared on the horizon, their armor shining under the twin suns. Behind them came robed elders and court officials. At the center, riding in a silver carriage, was the king himself. The queen stood tall on the rocky ledge, the human by her side. She tightened her grip on his arm, not to hold him back, but to remind herself she was not alone. The king stepped forward, his voice heavy with scorn. "So it is true. My queen, my wife, my crown-bearer, reduced to this, hiding in deserts, keeping company with vermin." He pointed at the human, his face twisted with disgust. "A creature unfit to even kneel in our halls. And you would shame us by standing beside him?" The elders murmured. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably. The queen felt all eyes on her. This was her trial, not spoken in words, but written in the judgment of her people. The human started to speak, but she lifted her hand, silencing him. She would face them herself. "Listen to me," she called out, her voice strong, echoing against the canyon walls. "For years I carried your expectations. For years I lived as nothing more than a vessel for an heir I could not give. You called me queen, but you never saw me as more than my womb. You bowed to me in daylight and whispered curses at night. And my husband," she looked straight at the king, "never offered me love, only chains." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The king's face darkened with rage. "How dare you? How dare I?" She cut him off, her voice sharper than steel. "How dare you imprison me in duty and call it honor? How dare you strip me of worth when I gave everything for this empire? If I am guilty of anything, it is that I have chosen to live, not simply to exist." The human stood beside her silently, his eyes locked on the crowd. Though his body bore scars and weakness, his presence gave her courage. One elder stepped forward, his voice cold. "You admit your betrayal, then? You admit you stand with this human against your own kind?" The queen's jaw tightened. "I admit I stand with one who saw me as more than a crown, who stood in front of me when danger came, who gave me respect when my own throne did not. If that makes me a traitor, then so be it. I would rather be a traitor with dignity than a queen with chains." The crowd erupted in noise, shouts of anger, whispers of shock, even a few voices of awe. The king raised his hand, silencing them. His voice dripped with venom. "You think you can defy me? You think you can rule without me? You are nothing without this throne. Without me, you are a broken woman hiding behind a weak creature." The queen felt fire rise in her chest. Slowly, she stepped forward, her cloak sweeping the ground. She looked directly into his aging eyes. "You are wrong," she said. "I am more without you than I ever was beside you. And this human," she placed her hand firmly on the man's shoulder, "is worth more than 1,000 crowns. He gave me what you never could, strength not built on fear but on trust." The king's face twisted with fury. He raised his staff, ready to order her capture. But before he could, a voice rose from the crowd. "Let her speak." It was a young guard, his armor still shining with newness. He stepped forward, bowing to the queen. "She speaks truth. We all know it. She carried shame that was never hers to bear." More voices followed. Some elders shouted for silence, but others looked uncertain. The queen saw the divide growing. For the first time, her people were questioning. The king roared, "Silence! She is mine. She is my queen." The queen's voice cut through his anger like lightning. "I am no one's possession. Not yours, not theirs. From this day, I choose my own destiny." She stepped beside the human, her hand never leaving his shoulder. "And I will walk it with him." For a moment, time froze. The crowd stared, caught between shock and awe. The king trembled with rage, but behind his fury was something worse, fear. Fear that his power was slipping. Fear that his people might see her strength and believe in it. The queen stood tall, her heart steady. For the first time in her life, she was not the prisoner of a crown. She was its challenger. And though the battle was far from over, she had won something greater than victory. She had won herself. The canyon was filled with silence after the queen's declaration. The king stood trembling with rage, his hand gripping his staff tightly while the crowd murmured with confusion. Some shouted for her arrest, others whispered in awe. The air felt heavy, as if the entire empire itself was holding its breath. The queen stood tall, her hand still resting on the human shoulder. She was no longer just a ruler abandoned by tradition. She was a woman who had found her voice. "You call me traitor," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the canyon. "But what is true betrayal? To leave a loveless throne or to abandon a heart that longs for dignity? You gave me duty without compassion, judgment without mercy. She looked at the human, her eyes softening. He gave me respect without asking for anything in return." The king's lips twisted into a sneer. "Respect? From a weakling who can barely stand? What future can you build with him? Your kind is not even compatible." The queen's chest tightened, but she lifted her chin. "That is where you are wrong." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small vial of blood she had drawn from the human when tending to his wound. She held it high for all to see. "Our healers studied long ago that human blood shares a rare bond with ours. It carries the key to new life. What you thought was impossible, what you blamed me for failing, has always had another path." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Elders leaned forward, whispering fiercely among themselves. Some shouted denial, others demanded proof, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Her words carried weight. The king staggered back, his face pale with both fury and fear. He knew her claim could not be easily dismissed. If true, then the queen's bond with the human was not betrayal, it was salvation. The queen continued, her voice stronger now. "This man you call weak gave me more hope in days than you gave me in years. He stood between me and your soldiers, though he had no power, no army, no crown. His blood may save my people, but his courage has already saved me, and I will not walk away from that. Not now, not ever." The human, though weary, stepped forward beside her. His voice was calm but steady. "I am not here to take a throne. I am not here to rule your people. I am here because she chose me, and I chose her. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The crowd stirred again. For the first time, voices began to rise, not in anger, but in support. A young guard lifted his weapon into the air. "Long live the queen!" he shouted. Others joined, their cries spreading through the canyon. "Long live the queen! Long live the queen!" The king roared above them, his voice desperate. "Silence! She has cursed us all. She will destroy our empire." But his words fell hollow. The people had seen his cruelty for too long, and now they had seen her strength. The king's power, once unshakable, cracked before their eyes. The queen turned to him one last time. Her gaze was sharp but not cruel. "Your reign is over. Go back to your throne if you wish, but it will no longer rule hearts. Your empire has already begun to change." The king's shoulders slumped. For a moment he looked smaller than he ever had, an old man clinging to a fading crown. Without another word, he turned away, his guards following reluctantly. The canyon grew quiet again. Slowly, the queen faced her people. Her voice softened, yet carried strength. "I was born your queen, but today I stand before you as something greater. Not because of a crown, not because of tradition, but because I have chosen love and I have chosen truth. Our future will not be written by fear. It will be written by courage and by the bond we now share with humanity." The people bowed not out of duty but out of respect. For the first time in her life, the queen felt what it meant to truly lead. The human placed his hand over hers. Their eyes met, and in that moment, two worlds connected. Later that night, as they stood beneath the twin moons, the queen whispered, "Do you realize what we have done? We have given them a future they never imagined." The human smiled softly. "And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to fight, a reason to live." She rested her head against his shoulder, her heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, she was not a queen trapped in sorrow. She was a woman reborn, carrying both hope and love. The stars above seemed brighter that night. as if the universe itself was blessing their union. The queen had made her choice, and in that choice, a new legacy was born. One where alien and human stood side by side, not as master and servant, but as equals. And in the whispers of the people, a new name began to spread, the queen who chose love over duty and gave birth to a future beyond bloodlines. Her story had only just begun,